Hey guys, David Chatham here with Angel Oak Creative. Thank you for joining us for another episode of our Talking Tough series. We're talking tough today with Amber Smith, Executive Director of Activate Good. When I was thinking about, who can really talk about generosity when it comes to time and talent, the first person that came to my mind was Amber and Activate Good. I'll let her tell you a little bit more about it, but they are just rock stars when it comes to encouraging volunteerism and promoting it, as well as just enabling it. So I'll let Amber talk a little bit more about that here. But Amber, first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We're really grateful for that. And just tell us a little bit about Activate Good, about you. You have an interesting story of how you got to where you are, and would love to just learn a little bit more about Activate Good and your mission.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you all. I'm Amber Smith. I'm the founder and executive director of Activate Good. I started this organization, I'm just going to say many years ago, when my friend and I decided to save up some money over a summer and go on a cross-country road trip to see if we could inspire people along the way to get involved in service and helping their communities. And we saved like $800 or $1,000 or some ridiculously not enough amount of money for the venture we were about to undertake, but we somehow made it 2.5 months out there on the road. There was some
Wow.
sleeping in cars, there was some generosity of strangers, there was a lot of adventures along the way. But ultimately, my best friend Heather and I, we came back with some very helpful lessons from our journey. And we had set out wanting to know, okay, if people are not already involved in their communities, why? What's holding them back? And what we heard from people we talked to was this common thread of, I want to get involved. I have a desire to get involved, but I just don't know how.
Yeah.
And it's you would think with this age of the internet that it would be so easy to get involved, but it's not. Either you're overwhelmed by all of the options out there, you don't even know what to Google, you don't know what is going to be the best fit for you, all of these potential reasons why you might not get involved. So we came back with the help of some friends. We launched the nonprofit that is now Activate Good. And our mission is to mobilize people around the Triangle community to get out there and improve the community through what we are calling people-powered projects for good. That's a new tagline as of last
That's
year.
great.
We went through some evolution and growth in COVID times. But the idea is making it easy, accessible for people to get involved in their communities and help out hundreds of local causes through service and other forms of civic action.
Great. Well, yeah, and I remember. I'm old enough to remember when you got started, and that the black car that you drove around in, and if I recall correctly, it was
Yeah.
it really was quite an adventure. And I remember you sharing that story soon after you returned, and it was very inspiring. And I've always kind of been a fan since then, just of your um, the spirit that you had to really understand that volunteerism and that community of giving back. When people think of generosity, most of the time they think of financial, right? They think of giving money, they think of giving financially, but we're looking at here as a generosity is a trait of a nonprofit tough community, right? So, generosity also means people being generous with their time and their talent, I'm assuming, right? And that's kind of where you come in about that. Because Activate Good is it really this hub for connecting volunteers with opportunities and really helping people find those chances to give generously of their time? What are some of the lessons you've learned about the value and importance of the community being generous with their time and talent? I know you kind of track what's happening around the country with that and where the triangle stands. And what are some of those lessons you've learned?
Yeah, so many lessons. I
Your
would
top
say
three.
I'll try. I would say one of the top that comes to mind is that it's very important, critical even, for us to recognize and honor and acknowledge all acts of service and kindness, and acts of helping others. Not everyone is in a place in their lives, especially this past year with the pandemic. Not everyone is in a situation where they can give a lot of time or talents or money, whatever form of giving you're talking about, but that every act is important, and we shouldn't downplay or discredit when you can only give 5 minutes or
Yeah.
$5, or every act is important. And you might be in a situation right now where you need other people's help, but later you might be in a situation where you can give a greater level of help, and that's okay. That's what community should be about. We should take turns. We should help each other out when we need it, and be able to rely on others when we need that help too. And I think that that perspective has allowed us to work on being more inclusive, because traditional volunteer service is sadly and ironically not a space that everyone has always felt included in.
Yeah.
So in order to make it accessible and inclusive, we've really got to honor and recognize the many different forms that people give of their time, talent, money, and other things, their energy.
Right.
So I would say that's a big lesson.
Yeah.
And another one would be that at their core, and this is the lesson we learned on the trip, people want to help. They want to be connected to something bigger than themselves. They want to be a part of a community where people are kind to each other and show that through their actions and through
Yeah.
service. And that it's often just a matter of showcasing all of the different ways that they can be, because they want to be, especially this past year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to talk about anything without COVID kind of being part of the discussion today, right? I mean, it's, what I loved about watching you and Activate Good during that time was, especially as the opportunity for volunteers to volunteer decreased in the sense of safety and things like that, you guys didn't just go kind of hide in a corner somewhere. You kept working and finding ways to enable people to get involved, and also to help nonprofits, because a lot of nonprofits, as you know, the demand for their services increased while the number of volunteers decreased. So helping them to navigate through that time was I'm sure an interesting experience for you guys. What did you see there in terms of that dynamic of having to address these increased needs with a decreased volume of volunteers? And what were some creative solves that, again, we're talking about nonprofit tough, right? And that to me exemplifies it when you're presented with a challenge. And we've been using a phrase, when the going gets tough, the tough nonprofits get going, right? That they don't just hunker down, that they start to find solutions. And my experience is that that's what you guys did. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. We watched as we have 540 nonprofit partners and community
Wow.
partners across the triangle, almost
Wow.
550. And you're definitely right. When this started to go down, they didn't see their needs stop. The needs went up. There were lines around the block at the food bank. I mean, you've seen the news stories. So community partners are 50% of what we do. They're half our customers. We have community partner nonprofit organizations who need the volunteers are half of our customers, and the other half are the people in the community who might want to volunteer. So we wanted to figure out a way to definitely maintain or even amp up our services to help them. On the other side, we didn't see a lack of interest in volunteering. We saw actually an increased interest in volunteering.
That's that generosity, right? That you're,
right.
Yeah.
People, the need has always been there, but the need was more obvious, it was more visible. And so what we saw was, I'm really trying to coin this phrase, civic renaissance. Remember this.
Wow.
Civic renaissance.
Okay.
I'm trying that for us. Civic renaissance. Okay. What we saw was a surge of energy from people in the community who wanted to figure out how to get involved. So when we identified that there was energy to help and that the need was there, it became a logistics problem.
Yeah.
Right. So we started thinking through, okay, how could we modify this type of volunteer experience or do this a certain way? And we started brainstorming and working with our community partners and helping them get creative and think through ways that they might be able to adjust their volunteer strategies and be safe or go completely virtual. And so we started offering a lot of virtual volunteer opportunities, remote volunteer opportunities where people could pick up supplies or utilize supplies around their homes, contact less socially distanced volunteering, if they could still do it in person. So just thinking through the logistics. It is certainly true that we weren't able to accommodate as many volunteers as we would have in a normal year just because of the capacity and spacing issues, but the energy was there. And what we think is going to happen, and this is why I'm not joking, but playfully using the term civic renaissance, is
Yeah.
we think that when things start to open up later this year, that we need to be in a position to capitalize on that energy and bring it forward into all of those volunteer spots that are now open and need support. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I've really answered your
No, that
question.
was great. No, I mean, but what, yeah, and I love, but that's exactly kind of the nonprofit tough mentality, right? Is you took a challenge and a real barrier to what normally would be the case, and you've turned it into an opportunity to actually maybe create some momentum to make a positive change going forward. So that is exactly what we're talking about. So, I think that to me, that's just a perfect example of, again, looking at those tough times and rather than kind of pulling back from them, leaning into them, right? And saying, okay, how can we use this? And, from our perspective at Angel Oak, that's what we saw with our clients who really wanted and had the desire to get through this in a way that was going to come out of it on the other side stronger and better. We saw, to your point, we saw generosity in a lot of forms come to life in terms of some of our nonprofits raised more money than they've ever raised during COVID. And that was thanks to the generosity of a strong community. But they also really did a good job of communicating that need and didn't just sit back and wait, right? So I think it's that combination. So as you talk about that, historically, I know some of the conversations I've had with you, and I've seen you present before. Uh, the triangle itself, kind of there, at least our area, there's a metric that says how engaged our community is, right? And in the past, you've really been motivated to try to move that needle into a more positive category. And I know we have a generous community, I don't doubt that, but there's always room for improvement, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, about maybe where our area kind of fits into that world and just what that opportunity is and kind of how people can respond to that need and that ability to maybe become a more generous community?
Yeah, and I'll be very curious to look back on this year and last year once the next reports come out to see what they say. But there's a national survey that is done every year that measures the people who self-report having volunteered for a nonprofit within the past year. And for many years, the Raleigh metro area and to some degree the state of North Carolina was in the second lower half. We were in the lower half of the rankings. So of the top metro areas, Raleigh and the Raleigh metro area went from 47th out of 51 to 35th and
Yeah.
all over the place down there. And then all of a sudden one year, I'm very excited to report, I'm very, very excited to report, we made it to the top 10. We are now ninth. I know we used to joke that we wanted to beat Charlotte. We are now beating Charlotte.
Always a little bit of healthy competition there
Right.
with the Queen City, right?
Oh no. Let's fight to see who can do the most good. Oh darn. Yeah. So we're ninth in the nation.
Wow.
In terms of metro areas of our size. Of course, we always want to be number one, but that's some big progress and that's great. There are so many factors that go into that data, so I couldn't give you a clean answer as to what happened?
Right.
But I'd like to think that it was the collective efforts of many people, many organizations, just helping make it more accessible to participate in their communities. But I also want to go back to something I said earlier about this, which was this survey measures people volunteering for traditional organizations.
Yeah.
What it does not capture is everyday acts of generosity,
Yeah.
helping a neighbor, being kind, stuff like that. So really making sure that we're recognizing and valuing those things, even if they don't make it into that survey as well.
So we're at number 9, and your goal is to, and I guess all of our goals should be, how do we get to that number 1? Uh, what, again, with the vision of this idea of being a nonprofit, tough community, and generosity being one of the traits that we see is that, what can our community do? I know you work with a lot of companies, a lot of corporations that use you to help facilitate volunteerism within their company. How can those types of entities, those parts of the community, what can they do to really help communicate the value and the need that goes along with generosity around volunteerism?
I would say focusing on impacts and focusing on the stories and the experiences of the people involved and the people being helped. Um, as much as we like to measure volunteer hours, people don't volunteer so that they can accumulate volunteer hours. They do it because they
True.
want to
True.
make a genuine impact. And so, organizations, companies, civic clubs, everyday people on the street, whoever you are, if you're participating in something good in a cause that you believe in that's making a great impact, share the impacts with others. The
Mm.
impacts are the most important thing, the results. Um, it's not your overhead ratio. It's not your volunteer hours. It's your impact. That's why we're all here to make an impact in the first place.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess what are you seeing with that community of businesses and all who, they had to go remote, they had to go virtual, they probably couldn't continue to engage a lot of volunteerism. Are you starting to see some of that come back, and kind of what do you think is going to happen with that? You're laughing. I'm curious.
Yeah. So last spring, when all this was starting out, we saw like a wave of cancellations. Like 95% of our
Wow.
volunteer things got canceled. And then, so I think everyone paused and like hung back for a minute to kind of figure things out. We started to see some companies getting really creative. There was a lot of integration of virtual volunteerism. A lot of the companies we are talking to now are still saying we're probably not going to be able to do much in person until at least the end of 2021
Mm.
because of just being the uncertainty, the liability concerns, et cetera. But we are getting an increasingly large number of inquiries from companies starting to come back to us. So we're seeing that surge happen again. I think as the weather gets better and as there's some hope and optimism around COVID-19. So this is kind of that civic renaissance that I was talking about. We got to capitalize on this energy now, not just Activate Good, but all nonprofits must do it, or we're going to lose out on some amazing potential. The other thing is companies are getting more strategic about the way that they are being generous with their time and their dollars, which I'm hopeful about. They are easing some of the more strenuous restrictions on grant applications
Oh,
and requirements. Yeah, they're trying to make that easier within the recognition that sometimes that can create an undue burden on nonprofits who are applying for funding. And they're also trying to dive deeper into systemic issues occurring, focusing a lot more on COVID-19, inequality, et cetera. And I think they all have an eye on equity and inclusion as well, which is very
yeah.
promising. So it'll be interesting to see how these companies re-strategize around some of these issues and how that will funnel into their employee volunteerism initiatives as we go forward.
Great. So I guess kind of thinking about as we, bring the conversation to a close, you know, Activate Good's all about activation, right? I mean, you're all about bringing things to life and really helping to do this. So what are some really clear calls to action that you can maybe give our community of both nonprofits who are watching this, as well as maybe a broader community, what are a step or two that they can take to ensure that they're encouraging volunteerism, to promote some of what you're talking about, where we're recognizing some of that generosity that hasn't always been defined as volunteerism, or maybe recognized as that. So what are a few steps that they can take, that we can all take, to do a better job of being effective around that?
Yeah, to nonprofits, I would say, back to the civic renaissance thing, um, communicate a lot with your audiences now, and think ahead to what the world's going to look like for you when things do open up, and walk that backwards and plan for that now.
Yeah.
Because if you want to maintain the energy that I hope that you as nonprofits are seeing, as we are, you've got to think ahead for that and put some infrastructure in place now to be able to engage people at a deeper level now.
And
For
I did
everyday,
prompt you to say that as a communications person, but just so everybody knows, that was pure Amber.
that was
So
just me. Um, for everyday people just out there, individuals, we have seen that nearly half of all new people who get involved in a cause through service or other ways do so because someone they know
mm,
asked them to or invited them to.
yeah,
Don't underestimate the power of word of mouth. So if you give someone a great experience working with, if you're a nonprofit and you give someone a great experience working with you, they're going to tell their friends, they're going to invite their friends, just like they would if they had a great product or a great experience with a business. Same concept. And for everyday individuals, invite your friends. Tell them about the work that your favorite cause is doing, and invite them to get involved.
and I would add to make sure you contact Activate Good if you have an interest in volunteering. How can they do that, Amber? What's the best way? I guess both ways. If a nonprofit is interested in trying to engage you, they just go to your website and there's an opportunity to do that there.
Yep, activategood.org. You can check that out. If you are people looking for volunteer opportunities, or companies or groups, we have hundreds of needs listed on our site, shared by our 540 plus network of community
I had
partners.
no idea there were that many. That's great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And there are thousands in the triangle.
I
So that's
know.
just like a portion of them. And then for folks needing to get in touch with us, we've got a great contact page. Check that out and reach out to us, and we'll see if we can help you out.
Great. And I know, I just wanted to get in, I saw on LinkedIn that you are launching something, I believe personally, recently, about being a founder of a nonprofit. Do you want to put in a quick plug for that? It looked kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I sort of quietly on the side, I've developed a hobby of posting on YouTube. So I have a sort of a vast collection. I think it's around 80 videos now, all about nonprofits, starting a nonprofit, fundraising tips, etc. It's been a really fun and interesting journey. I had no idea there was so much interest outside of my own little world in that topic, but a lot of people have reached out to me. It's been very gratifying. And so for those who have been interested in starting a nonprofit, I put together a little online training for them, and my Founder to Full-Time Academy. So
Yes.
that's that.
Well, it's funny. A few months ago, I noticed you start building this content, and I was wondering, wow, that's impressive, because you've been doing it almost weekly, I think, or pretty close. And I'm like, wow, that's, and then I noticed just recently that you launched this founder initiative, and I was like, there was a plan all along. So
Well,
congratulations.
there's not a plan all along, but I have to say, I was just like, I'll see if anyone cares about the mistakes I learned from starting a nonprofit, and people cared, so that's good.
Well,
And
be
I
sure
started
to,
getting a lot of questions, and I was like, you know what? A lot of people are having the same questions and problems and challenges getting started, so why not?
well, that's great. Well, tell people how they can find that now.
That is at foundertofulltime.com. But just to be clear, that is a totally separate initiative from Activate Good, and no way related.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I saw that and I was like, wow, it makes sense. I mean, you obviously have done a great job with Activate Good. Thank you for all the work you do for our community and the impact you make, as well as your team. and the amazing amount of volunteers and those 540 partners that you have already. But you're right, there are, I think the last I heard, there were like 5,000 nonprofits in Raleigh alone. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. So if you're a nonprofit, be sure you get in touch with Amber as it relates to volunteerism and just supporting that cause. And if you're looking for a place to find opportunities to volunteer, activategood.org is a great place to go. So Amber, thank you. Anything that we didn't ask you about that you want to make sure people hear about volunteerism and the importance of that, of building a nonprofit tough community?
I would just say, don't hold back on your support of nonprofits. Now's the time. We need you more than ever. Go for it.
Thank you so much. Well, again, thank you for taking time. For people who want to find this video, certainly in other videos in the series, you can go to nonprofittough.com or angeloakcreative.com and just look for Nonprofit Tough in the top of the page there. And we're creating a neat little series and have really spoken to some really neat people. So thank you for being one of those, Amber, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.